natural. So I just have them there like with me.
Great. I'll just do a quick intro and then leave it with you. And then at the end, obviously, you can signpost people to ifeel as
Okay,
well.
amazing. I didn't
Um,
prepare any slide decks or anything. I was just
it's okay. Uh, that's completely fine. I've started the webinar on YouTube as well, in case anyone wants to join from there. And then I'll start the recording as well. We're almost at time. Um, I'll signpost people in the chat as well,
okay.
anyways, to the Well Hub and um, okay, it's 12, so I'm gonna start the webinar.
Okay, great. You're gonna ask the questions, right?
Yeah, yeah, I will. I have them. Great. Welcome everyone who's joining us today. I'm just gonna wait a couple of minutes for some more people to join and then get started with the webinar. So get comfy in the meantime. Thank you to whoever is joining. We'll get started shortly. Just waiting for a couple more people to join. In the meantime, I think I can introduce our speaker of the day that's joining us. Angelica, thank you so much for being here with us today. Just to give you a bit of context, Angelica is joining us from ifeel, which is a therapy and counseling app partnered with WellHub. I'll signpost you to it at the end of the webinar, but Angelica is a clinical therapist at ifeel. So obviously she's here today to answer all the anonymous questions that you've submitted while signing up for the event today. And yeah, in the meantime, if you want to introduce yourself before we get started, Angelica.
Amazing, Lara. Thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you everyone who's joining. And thank you for everyone who's submitted some of the questions. That's amazing to see how curious you are about these topics. So yeah, like Lara was saying, I'm a clinical psychologist at ifeel. I have been working as a therapist for almost 12 to 13 years now. I never like to say that I'm an expert because every time there is something new that happens, you realize you're not an expert. But I am passionate about everything that has to do with behavior, with emotions, with psychology. So really, that's what we do at ifeel. So I'm just eager to answer some of your questions.
Great. I think we can get started with the first one in the meantime. So what would you advise for someone that suspects they might be experiencing burnout?
Okay, burnout, I think today is kind of a buzzword. So everything that we do, me as a clinical psychologist, but also at ifeel, is that we try to really analyze and to debunk in a way some of the myths that are around there. So someone who may be experiencing burnout, we should also start checking if it's burnout or if it's I'm gonna use quotes, if it's quote unquote stress, because they kind of look very similar. um, so we really need to start saying, is it stress or is it burnout? If it really is burnout, we should start really looking at the signs. What is happening? What are the main symptoms? What are the things that can be fixed in the moment? And what are the things that cannot be fixed in the moment? Because many times there are a lot of little things that you can start doing, because burnout, from latest research, we've seen that it can take up to 3 years to fully recover from a burnout episode. So we really need to be seeing what are the things that we can start doing, because burnout is not about being stressed, and burnout is not about just resting it away and it's going to magically disappear. There are a lot of things that we need to start doing. So we should start checking for signs, for symptoms, and what are the things that I can start changing today so that it's going to start feeling a little bit easier. And of course, talk to it to your employer or talk to someone who may be directly involved, but someone that you can trust, because this is also about the safe space that you create.
Thank you. Next question is, how do you keep supporting your partner who's having a hard time at work, although you have your own personal work-life problems? They're asking specifically for practical tips on what could be said and done to support said partner.
Um, I think we get this a lot in therapy as well. Like, what can I do? What can I say to someone? But I think many times silence is also an option. We tend to go silence, not in terms of I'm going to hide what's happening, but silence to listen to what's happening to the other person. Because supporting a partner who's having a hard time, that partner is having a hard time because they have specific thoughts, specific cognitive schemes that they have internally. So many times we cannot help from that part. And I know this question may be coming from frustration and from love, from actually wanting your partner to feel better. But many times that silence and that active listening to what the other person is going through can help much, much more than trying to do something very specific. And I know what this person is asking. I don't know who you are, of course, but I know what you're asking are practical and very specific tips of what can be said and done. But many times, just being present, being fully there. Yesterday, I was doing a workshop with one of our clients, and somebody was asking, is hugging someone a good thing? I was like, it's the best thing you can do. Many times, a very heartfelt hug and being there and remembering or reminding that person that you are there, that you're there to listen and not to judge, that you're there to listen and not to bring solutions. Because many times when we struggle, we don't need for more solutions, but we need to know that we are supported in case a solution comes up. Um, Especially when it's about hard times at work, and if it's not the same type of work that we do, it's very difficult to realize or to know what is it that you need support in. So many times we kind of go into this loophole of what are the solutions, what are the solutions, and many times it's that support and that just active presence in the other person's life. So this is what I would say to you. Just a practical tip is to actually practice this active listening and to support by being there without necessarily constantly trying to find a solution. Many times we need time of our own to find those solutions, but if we find there's a metaphor that I really like, which is a playground, right? It's imagine that the playground is filled with solutions. So many times we need somebody who creates that playground, but we have to play inside, and those games are the solutions. So we need someone who could build that playground. So maybe you can ask your partner, hey, what does your playground look like? What can I bring in to this playground that you're going to need? Right. So many of these situations can be very helpful to actually support by asking that other person also, what can I do for you? What is something that would be helpful to you right now? And active listening. This is just for me the one of the best tools that we can have.
You. So the next question is more of a lengthy one.
Okay.
I'm living with a chronic disease that recently affected my quality of life significantly. I may need more days off than regular employee, and I sometimes am slower at my work. My company is quite fast-paced nowadays, and returning after a few days off feels very overwhelming. How can I communicate my condition to my colleagues so that they are more understanding, but yet no oversharing?
Wow. First of all, I want to underline the strength behind this and the vulnerability of actually asking a question like this, because already feeling like you're slower, and I say it in quotes because we don't know if that's the reality, or if it's the interpretation that this person is making of that work. But actually coming back to work with a chronic illness and dealing with the illness and dealing with, I don't know what kind of illness it is, but dealing probably with loss of certain faculties or loss of certain abilities, all of that is grief by itself. So grief is already a heavy, heavy load. So I don't know if you're here today, the person who asked this, but just I take my hat off to you to for the strength that you have to keep on going and that resilience. And I think that's there. What I was saying about the slower, because we don't know if it's an interpretation or not, it's because many times we feel that we're behind other people just because we are interpreting that the other ones are doing it better. And this comes from people who have or don't have a chronic disease. We have a tendency nowadays to feel that we are slower, that we are doing less, that the other person is doing more, that the other person is doing better. So the first thing would be to for this person to analyze, am I really doing or going slower, or is it something that I'm perceiving? If that's the truth, I think, I mean, if it's the true in terms of you are objectively, let's say, slower, first focus on the behaviors that you can do. What are the things that you can carry? What are the things that you cannot carry? How can you help others? Where are the things that you feel most comfortable in? And what are the things that feel most controllable to you in that sense? And how to communicate it. I think it could be interesting to communicate it in a way that it doesn't feel that you're justifying a certain behavior in front of other people. For example, not to use this is going to sound awful, I know, but not to use it as an excuse for them and for you to feel that you're going slower, just to give them some context. I don't know exactly what the illness is, but many times I have been working with people with for example in a neurodivergent spectrum. So many times saying if I get too many notifications at the same time, I get overwhelmed. So I'm going to go step by step and I'm going to try to organize things as per their importance, for example, or letting them know that if you need something for today or to flag it, just to be extremely clear on what are the things that you need. For example, this thing is for a client and they need it by the end of day. So please let me know this beforehand so that I know how to prioritize in my own list. So this way you're not overwhelmed and the other person is going to get what they need. That way is going to get a lot easier information. And again, like I was saying, some context is always important in these situations, but until the point where you feel comfortable sharing, and again, not to justify a perceived lack of pace in this kind of work, but so that you can see that it's something that you're struggling with, you're perfectly free, and it's your personal liberty to share or to disclose anything that happens with your health. So you don't have to say anything, but if it feels most comfortable to you, I think it would be nice to let them know as a context, I'm struggling with what, insert here whatever it is that you're struggling with, so that you can let them know and give them some context, not necessarily just to say all of the information, but to give them some context, um, so that they can understand, like you were asking, but also that you would get the feeling that you're getting to the goals that you have and the situations that you're in. So I think those are like the biggest parts. One of it, just focus on what can you control, and then when the time comes that you want to share with your colleagues, just let them know from a context perspective and not from a justification perspective. Because if you're dealing with chronic illness, it's not your fault, of course. So you don't need to justify why you may be going slower, but some context would be important.
Thank you. Before going on to the next question, I also wanted to call out how much we appreciate the vulnerability of all the people that decided to input their questions. Obviously, I reviewed them ahead of the session and just made a list of them. So I just wanted to, just take a moment to recognize the vulnerability of all these questions. And thank you for, being brave enough to share and ask your experiences and obviously ask the support. Obviously, that's always the first step in order to get help. So yeah. On to the
Absolutely.
next one. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that
No,
before.
just nodding along what you were saying because that's absolutely true. You mentioned vulnerability and braveness in the same sentence, and that's actually it. Vulnerability is to be brave.
Yeah.
So thanks to everyone.
I come from a psychology background, so I can definitely relate. Uh,
Totally.
so on to the next question. How can I manage boundaries with someone who does not respect them at all due to their mental illness? And they stated borderline as a specific.
Okay. Um, Borderline personality disorder is actually characterized or is one of the main aspects of it is those intense bouts of emotion in a way. So when you're dealing with someone who is diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, hopefully they're having their treatment and they are understanding their situation and they're understanding their triggers and they're understanding all of this, hopefully. If not, I know they can be people who and I'm not saying this from a place of judgment but more from a place of understanding. There is a lot of difficulty there in boundaries but also in the emotional range. So they can be perceived as people who are very difficult, quote unquote, difficult to work with. But I would focus on the behaviors and not the person. It's very easy to see someone who has a situation like this to see them as since they have borderline personality disorder, they are like this and there's nothing to do about it. So to separate the behaviors from the person is very, very useful because that way we're not judging a person, but we can judge a behavior, whether it's if it's quote unquote good or bad, or if it's helpful or not. Um, Again, hopefully they will be in treatment, but from your perspective, I think it would be a lot easier to focus on the behaviors. And when it comes to interactions and boundaries, there's actually I was thinking about a way that there is a very interesting way of communicating certain aspects. Uh, and it's 4 letters, and it was created by Kim Scott. She's the author of Radical Candor, which is very useful when we talk about boundaries. And the word is corn. So the C comes from context, the O is from observation, the R is from results, and the N at the end is next steps. So this kind of conversation starters are very useful with people who, even if they don't have borderline personality disorder, but it's very helpful when we're starting a conversation like this because we are focusing on the behavior. So again, the context is what was happening in that moment. The observation is what did I observe? What was happening that was objectively true? The R is the result, is what happened. I mean, what was the result of this conversation? And then the next steps. And the next steps are usually related to the boundaries because many times we tend to think that boundaries is always about saying no, but it's also about setting clear intentions and communicating very clearly what is it that we need and what is it that we expect from the other person. So this little word is very, very useful to understand and to deal with difficult conversations because it's very direct, it's very short, and especially when it's boundaries. Try also, again, I'm going again with the justification side. Try not to justify why you're doing the things you're doing or why you're setting the boundary that you're saying. Because if it's someone who has the tendency to not respect those boundaries, um, there will always be a reason as to why your boundary is not good enough. So try not to justify. There is a boundary. You said what you needed to say, and then you can move on. Because remember that we're dealing with behaviors here and not the person itself. So hopefully this little word is going to be useful for you. And if you need more information, it's about the book is called Radical Candor, and it's very, very interesting to deal with hard conversations and difficult situations.
Thank you. So next one says, I'm in a new relationship and my partner is going through a mental health crisis. I want to support them, but I also don't want to lose myself or take on too much. What are the best ways to show up for someone in a situation like this while still looking after my own well-being?
I was thinking about the playground again, and I think it could also be a beautiful question to ask your partner. like what would this playground look like? What could I do for you that is going to be helpful? Because many times I hear behind, I think you said, I don't want to lose myself, something like that. Many times behind that losing myself too much is trying to find solutions as to what does the other person need, and we're trying to find solutions alone. It's like trying to play to build a playground without knowing what kind of toys we're going to need. So it's kind of putting everything in without knowing exactly what's going to be useful, or trying to start a cake recipe without knowing if we need flour, eggs, milk, or if we need, oh, there you.
Sorry, the light went out here.
Yes.
I'm
I
gonna
thought it
switch
was
this
me.
back on. No, no, no. Sorry for
Okay,
that.
it's okay. I'm going to keep, oh, you're back.
I'm back. Sorry. Sometimes
It's
it
okay.
happens in the office.
It happens today because I'm not in the office, but usually it can happen as well. So, like I was saying, it's trying to build or to bake a cake without knowing the recipe, right? It's like putting ingredients together without knowing where it goes. So, something that could be very interesting is to, and I know it sounds kind of obvious, but to talk to your partner and, behaviorally speaking, what are the things that could be helpful? Because again, when we try to find solutions to a problem that we don't know what it is, um, it's very difficult to know. So, and I believe, and I wholeheartedly believe this as a therapist, but also in my role, let's say, as a non-therapist, is that support comes from collaboration and from contribution, and not from you trying to, this is going to sound weird, but not to save the other person. It's contribution. What can I do for you? What's going to be easier for you so that I know where I'm going with all of this? So, so try to look, and if you want to place the metaphor of the playground, I think it's very useful if you want to use it, because it's, let's try to build this together. What do you need from me so that I'm not going to start finding solutions all the time, and so that you can know and organize your expectations accordingly.
So next question is, are there any useful strategies to manage mild anxiety? I used to take daily medication for this and would prefer not to start taking it again, but sometimes I still get anxious, experiencing symptoms like shaking hands, brain fog, feeling tearful are the main symptoms reported. This doesn't happen often, so I don't feel the need to refer back to the GP, but knowing some strategies to help would be very useful.
Okay.
Help with the symptoms.
Okay. So, first of all, I think I did like this phase when you were saying medication, not because I think medication is a bad thing, but because I think relying solely on medication to work through anxiety is what can be counterproductive. And I think it's great that if you're here, the person who has the question, I think it's great that you, or someone else who may be going through mild anxiety, that you don't want to necessarily go back to medication. That means that you've worked through part of the anxiety that was inducing it or producing it, and now you're feeling much more confident into your own abilities. So that's starting there. And anxiety usually comes from a lot of activation. There's a very or hyper activated nervous system. So movement helps release it. When we talk about mild anxiety, we have to say that, and we have to understand that there is no magic pill. And you've said it yourself, they don't want to go back to the medication. But constant movement is very helpful. So physical exercise is the first thing that we always say. Thankfully, we have WellHub that we can work through physical exercise. And anything that feels particularly interesting. Many times also for anxiety can be useful, any kind of physical activity, of course, either cardio or strength training, but anything that feels a little bit challenging, but at the same time, fun enough to keep doing it. Thankfully, through WellHub, there's so many activities to choose from that I'm sure you can find one. And it's going to keep your body, our bodies were made to move. So if we stay constantly still, anxiety is going to kind of feel much more, we're going to feel it more. because it's all about cortisol and how it moves through our bodies. So physical exercise on the long run, and pun intended, but on the long run, you're going to notice that your body is going to adapt to that movement, and it actually is going to crave that movement. Endorphins are going to start moving in, but we don't need years of exercise. Even the first week, people start seeing symptoms being reduced. Other aspects is a much more cognitive one, is to recognize the triggers. Do you recognize any kind of triggers that makes you feel, I think you mentioned brain fog, being tearful, all of those, try to figure out what are those triggers, if there are any, because many times anxiety just kind of moves like a wave and just passes through us. But trying to recognize those triggers is a very good option. And even therapy if needed. That's why ifeel is here for as well. You know, if you need therapy, of course, to help you work through, even text therapy can be very interesting to help you work through all of those triggers and what is probably maintaining that anxiety. And regulation techniques, everything that has to do with mindfulness techniques, with grounding techniques, just allowing your body to recognize that it's safe. You know, anxiety is a fear-induced state. So allowing your body to recognize that it's safe, that it can be regulated on its own. And many times anxiety is going to come, many times, no, always is going to come and it's going to go. So recognizing that it moves like a wave is also a very interesting technique. That's why mindfulness actually works, because mindfulness helps our brains to focus on something, recognizing that that something is going to disappear at one point. Anxiety works in the same way. So physical movement, and the cognitive side, working through the triggers, and on the both cognitive and the emotional side, just regulation techniques day by day. This is not some, let's not wait for anxiety to be overwhelming. Just let's try to do these exercises daily, and I'm sure that mild anxiety is gonna go little by little. You mentioned also tearful. If you feel tearful, allow yourself to cry a little bit, just to let go and release a lot of that tension that's there. It's fine. It's gonna go on its own.
Thank you. Next one is, how do I handle grief at work?
Well, I don't know if they mentioned grief about something that's happening at work, or grief, somebody who lost someone and they have to go back to work with that grief. I think it's more the second one, so I'm going to focus on the second one. With grief, we need to allow for space in our lives. You know, grief is like anxiety. It comes and it goes. You know, you can be fine one day after a big loss, and then the next day you're incredibly sad. The next day you're feeling fine. The next day it's kind of, and even through the same day you can be just going around your life and normally, and then all of a sudden this wave of sadness is going to come, right? So the first aspect, I think, is to understand the unpredictability of grief, and to understand that it's going to come in waves. And you can be in a meeting, something reminds you of that person or the situation that you lost, and somehow you're going to feel the wave coming in. So understanding and being very compassionate with yourself when you're going through these phases, it's this phase of grief. So also understand that grief is something that I really like to tell my patients when they're going through a period of grief, is that grief for me is like I love metaphors. I think you know this by now, but uh, grief is like for me, it's like a big hole, you know, and people, what they tend to do is that, or we try to fill that hole with things, more work or going out or substances many times or behaviors, or but just to understand that grief is like a hole, but life is going to keep happening around that hole. So all of the behaviors that we do at work, with friends, with family, it's going to keep happening around that hole. So understanding that that is going to be part of our lives, it's also helpful. Not the pain that's going to be always there, but the aspect of grief. And also to give yourself time to process and feel that pain. From a therapeutic perspective, when I work on grief, there is, I think many people are very familiar with the Kubler-Ross model, which are the 5 phases of grief. But I like to work with another author who's called William Worden, and he talks about 4 tasks of grief instead of five just phases that we kind of passively go through. So when we have four tasks, and the four tasks are accepting the reality of the loss, processing the pain, adjusting to the new world without that person, and finding an enduring connection while you move forward. So if you think about it, there are four tasks that, and one of them specifically could mean about work, is that you have to adjust to the new world without that person. Many things at work can remind you of that person, and many things about your routines can remind you of that person. So try to pinpoint those and try to see, where am I missing them the most? What are the emotions that I'm feeling when I recognize these triggers? And whenever you start doing that, you start, in a way, normalizing, which is the last task, which is finding the enduring connection and move forward. Uh, then you're going to realize that you have been moving forward little by little, but recognizing the emotions and recognizing the pain that's behind it. Grief, of course, is a very painful process, but it's also something that we all, if worked through it with some companionship, is a process that we can all go through.
Thank you. The next one is basically three questions in one that kind of are interlinked. What do you do when you're just feeling checked out from work? What do you do when you're lacking confidence, and how to boost resilience?
Okay.
Three in one.
Okay, three in one. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is what do you do when you're feeling checked out from work? It's going to sound counterintuitive, but really disconnect, because many times that disconnection is kind of an avoidant process. So I'm not saying that if you're feeling checked out, you should quit or anything like. It's not about that. It's about stopping the need to reconnect, or to, if I'm feeling disconnect or checked out, I need to reconnect again, or I need to. It's kind of an avoidant pattern. So the more we try to avoid it, the more disconnected we get, or the more checked out we feel. So really taking a moment to just saying, I cannot do this anymore. There's a lot of things going on. So maybe just a reset, and then we can go. But that reset can be minutes, and that reset can be even some hours, maybe taking a longer, this is going to feel easier than said than done, but maybe a way longer lunch, or saying, I cannot work this afternoon because there's just so many things going on. And that actually disconnection is going to help us feel much more productive, because our brains can actually rest from that constant trying to reconnect and reconnect. Like the Wi-Fi's would try to reconnect again. Well, this is the same thing. The more it tries to reconnect, the more battery the phones, the more they try to reconnect, the more battery they lose. Well, the same thing happens to us. The more we try to reconnect, the more batteries and energy we're going to lose. So let's try to put aside a little bit, just for some minutes, get out, just really come back to it. But then if it's something that's about loss, and I'm thinking about the burnout question from before, if it's about the loss of meaning at work, if it's about the feeling that it's just not aligned with you anymore, or a way deeper feeling from completely checked out, maybe it's time for change. There's always this, and there's always the moment where we have to ask ourselves, is this something that I'm willing to keep doing for a longer period of time, or are there any solutions in the short term or medium term? Because many times we can just find a very kind of quick solution to little things. Many times when it's deeper, and when you've lost the alignment, for example, with what you do, well, many times it's time to ask yourself, is this really want to keep doing, right? The second question was, when you're lacking confidence.
Oh, yes.
When you're lacking confidence, I love these questions. It can be very broad, so we could be talking about confidence for at least an hour. So whenever we're lacking confidence, let's try to remember that usually lacking confidence is an issue of comparing ourselves. Comparisons are normal. To compare yourself to someone else is actually part of our evolution. We've learned to compare ourselves to kind of set a perspective, and to kind of to see where we are on the social ground, which is important for survival. But let's not compare ourselves to the fact that they are doing better and I'm doing worse. because that's not necessarily true. So whenever we're lacking confidence, let's go back, and I'm going to be very, it's going to sound funny again, me with the behaviors, but let's go back to the behaviors. And lacking confidence, what does it mean? Does it mean that I'm not good enough? Does it mean that I'm not prepared enough? Does it mean that I'm not smart enough? Does it mean that our brains are going to try to find evidence of all of those things? Um, but in the end, lacking confidence and that we accept that we have that thought about ourselves is actually easier. It is kind of like the anxiety part. Whenever we accept that there is an anxiety coming in, an anxiety coming in, we can also accept the fact that, hey, I'm not feeling entirely confident today. And it's fine. But go back to your behaviors. Go back. Let's imagine it's a big presentation that you have. Let's go back to the behaviors. Did I went through the presentation? Did I go through the presentation? Do I know my numbers? Do I know my work? Then if it's all okay, then it's fine. I work a lot with students when they go to their exams, or when they're even on PhDs levels. It's like, you've written this dissertation yourself. You know your topic. So that little part of lacking confidence, well, it's going to be there, but we can allow it to move past it. And the last one was resilience.
Yeah, how to boost resilience.
How to boost resilience. That's another topic that we could stay hours in. Resilience comes from having had a hard time and going out of that hard time successfully. Now, what does that mean? It's going to be different for everyone. What the hard situation was and how we went out of it is also going to be different. But I think it's important to boost resilience to remember what were the abilities or the behaviors that made you come out of that situation that you feel proud of. Because taking pride in doing something difficult and actually going through it, that's the most resilient thing we can do. Recognize that something was difficult and actually saying to ourselves, and I did it. Good or bad or whatever, but I went through it. This happens a lot with people who start doing sports, or I'm going to give you a very, very personal example. I did a Spartan race not too long ago. Uh, it was muddy. You had to jump. You have to go through, the rings and all of it. Of course, many of those obstacles I couldn't pass them because I couldn't do it. So I had to do penalty loops and all of this. But what happens, those things are the things that build resilience. Doing things that are difficult, understanding that many of them are not going to be done perfectly, and still taking pride in putting yourself through something hard and recognizing that you did the best job that you could do, because those abilities, you're going to be able to extrapolate them into something else. So resilience actually comes from doing hard things, but being proud of actually putting yourself into doing hard things. And this works for everything, for life, for work, for partners, for friends. Resilience absolutely has to come from a difficult situation before, but being proud in what you did and recognizing and remembering those abilities, even writing them down. I went through a very difficult interview, and this is what I learned about myself. Then you write it down and you keep it for yourself, and that's how you start boosting and building that resilience. Um, that way we know how to face the other day when we start learning more abilities about ourselves.
Thank you. Next one is, how do you deal with a manager who weaponizes rudeness and calls it being direct?
Um, I think there's an issue about interpretation here. Uh, the way we interpret what the other person is saying says more about us than about the other person, because the other person is going to do whatever, and they are interpreting this in this way. This rude, but I'm just being direct. This is another type of justification. I'm just being direct. It's you who are feeling like that. But there's a concept in mindfulness that I really like, and it's called the Teflon mind. And it's that things happen, but they don't stick to you. So to train ourselves to say, okay, this person is using a very tough language, but I'm going to allow for those things to move past. Of course, if somebody's being rude or insulting us or just treating us aggressively, of course, those are things that are boundaries that we need to set. Like, I'm not going to keep talking to you if you're going to talk to me in this way. This is actually part of the communication part that we were saying before. Um, if you insult me, I'm just not going to deal with somebody who's insulting me. Those boundaries are very, very important to use. But that Teflon mind is very interesting to kind of train it into, if I know that this person is like this, if I know that this person is not going to understand my reasoning, why do I lose so much energy with this person? Just allow yourself to, like those things, that's why the Teflon, it doesn't stick to you and you can just allow for it to move past it. And of course, recognizing that if there is an aggressive behavior and an aggressive conversation, well, it's important to call it out as well.
Thanks. This is a kind of a different topic. So how do you navigate a long distance relationship, possible relocation overseas, and so on?
Very different question. um, when it comes to relationships, there's something that when I work at couples in a couples therapy, something that I really like to do is to see. So when I'm in couples therapy, I don't see the two people in the couple. I see, or we create like a third entity that's going to represent the um, the couple itself. So I'm not working with two people, but I'm working with one person who symbolizes the couple. So we create a work based on values. So for you, if the person is here and you're trying to navigate that long distance relationship, imagine that your couple is another person and that person has a set of values. They have things that are important. They have a way of communicating. They have a way of transmitting information. They have a way of behaving, and try to see what's the most important thing that that person has. Of course, it's translated to the couple. For you as a couple, what is the most important thing to you? What are your values? What is going to be the most important thing? Be very clear about how the communication is going to look like. Uh, I think you said, did you mention the countries?
Countries are Ireland and US. That's why I
Oh, okay.
mentioned overseas, because
Oh,
obviously it's
overseas. Okay.
different.
And I was saying this because if there's going to be a time zone change, of course, we need to understand that the moment that they wake up is going to be the moment when I'm going to bed, all of this. So try to be very clear in your communications. When is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? When are the moments that you're going to be able to talk? If you're going to be meeting halfway, how many times a year, how many times a week, if it's possible. So try to be very clear and very open about this and really think about your values. What are your values as a couple? Is it important to you to talk every day, or is it important to you to just talk about more of the bigger conversations? Is WhatsApp a constant way of good communication, or is it better to have longer video calls? It's going to depend on that. But what are your main values in that couple? And also when a problem arises, I always like to, and this is something that I work on couples therapy, is that when there is a problem, people tend to go at each other when there's a problem. When there is a problem, try to see again the problem as it is, and you two are against that problem, not you two against each other, but against the problem. And that's going to release a lot of the pressure from trying to decide what is it that needs to be done. Like we were saying before about collaboration, this is the same thing. You are both going to go through a change. I don't know if it's going to happen, but um, talk it over, communicate it, collaborate on how it is going to look like, and focus on your values and what's important to you.
Another one around personal life. What do you do when your personal life has absolutely overwhelmed you, and your job is all-consuming?
Wow. Um, I would start with if I had this person in therapy, I would start with, let's try to define what overwhelming is. Because many times when we say overwhelming, it's because we're not prioritizing. What are your priorities right now? And I think it could be a very good exercise if you're here, if the person who asked the question is here. I think it could be, or anyone who benefits from this answer, could be very interesting to start doing, for example, an Eisenhower matrix. You know, this matrix of the delegate, what's important, what's urgent, what's not important, what's urgent. That matrix could be very interesting to start to allow you to prioritize. Where are you putting your energy? When we're overwhelmed, it's because many times those priorities are not set correctly. Understandable if there is a lot of things happening, if your personal life is filled with things, if your work life is filled with things, of course it's going to feel like there is a lack of structure, like it is a lack of structure there. But I think it could be interesting to allow yourself to prioritize in order to feel less overwhelmed, because many times overwhelming happens because there is a lack of structure. Not that it's a judgment, but it probably happened because of the system that was created around all of the work, all of the personal life, and it could be very helpful to allow yourself to prioritize. And many times we realize there are a lot of things that we're doing that are not necessarily useful right now for us, or they were not needed. The other day, I was just again with a personal example, I had a million things to do, and then I started picking up some things from the floor and reorganizing them. And I was like, I don't need to do this. So I started feeling overwhelmed about something that wasn't important in that moment. So many times, let's allow ourselves, that's a tiny example, but let's allow ourselves to really see what's important, what needs my attention. And many times, one goal per day is going to feel enough.
This is pretty much the last question we have. Then I'm sure maybe people don't want to ask other questions, but I'm just gonna open it up to whoever is tuned in, and if not, obviously we can redirect to ifeel. So how do I set boundaries with someone who is my work senior? For example, they ask invasive questions about health and finance, and I do not feel comfortable answering these kind of questions. So how do I deal with that?
Well, if you've already set a boundary, it's actually your boss. Just because he's your senior, it's not doesn't mean that you have to tell them anything that you don't want to do about your personal or private life or finances or health or whatever. Um, it's not their right even to ask it. I mean, they can ask, but you can absolutely say that you don't want to set that boundary. Actually, while you were reading the question, I was actually listening, and you said something, I don't feel comfortable answering them. That is a perfectly valid answer to that senior at work, to say, thank you, even thank you for your concern. I just don't feel comfortable answering them because it's part of my private life. And I think it's interesting to start with the thank you for your concern, because we don't know if it's coming from actual concern or if it's coming from something else, or we have no idea. But I think it's important to start with that aspect of gratitude and to say, hey, well, thanks for this. And this is also important. Thanks. And I don't feel comfortable. Not thanks, but I don't feel comfortable. I know it's a very tiny change, but when we use the but, it's like we're eliminating everything that comes before. So when we say thank you and I'm not feeling entirely comfortable to ask this, you realize that gratitude and not feeling comfortable can go together. And that actually helps to set that limit much closer to you, and to say, well, I'm open to the gratitude and I'm just not comfortable with answering this. It's your right, absolutely. Especially because I think you mentioned they've answered these questions in the past. So, and even if the situation changed, you don't have to answer them.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Angelica, for answering all of these questions. And once again, thank you to anyone who submitted the questions. We really appreciated this, and hopefully this session was useful for you. Before we wrap up, I shared at the beginning of the session, but I'm going to share it again in the chat, the link to access ifeel through WellHub if you need any support. Usually there's one-to-one chat support available from the starter plan on WellHub. We've recently introduced one session per month on the silver plan, and then from the gold plan onwards, you can unlock four therapy sessions online, one-to-one with ifeel. So obviously a lot to think about if you're looking for support in that specific area of support for your mental well-being. You can either access it through WellHub or through the link that I just shared. If you're on your phone, probably it's easier. But yeah, if you have anything that you wanted to share, Angelica, before we wrap up the session, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Clara. Just to thank you again for giving us the space and for always putting the focus on mental health. We're just extremely happy to partner with you on this mental health app and to keep working towards improving mental health. From I feel it's you have everything you need in the terms of mental health support. You can do text therapy, you can do video therapy, which is kind of the most classic type of therapy. And what's interesting is that it's available in about 55 now languages. So any kind of language that you need, any kind of problem that you may have, because we also have very specialized psychologists. I was saying a little bit about specialties here, grief, anxiety that I work with a lot, couples therapy and all of this, but all of my colleagues, therapists, they all have their specific specialties. So whatever it is that you need, just don't wait until you feel too overwhelmed. Or even if you don't need therapy for something quote unquote bad, you can also say, well, I want to improve my personal relationships. They're good, but I could just kind of want to improve into this, or I want to create healthier habits. All of this can benefit from having therapeutic support. So it's there, it's available to you. So we'll be happy to receive you on the I feel side.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks again to anyone that joined. Obviously, the recording will be made available. And anything else you can find, hopefully directly on WellHub to support you. Great. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Amazing. Thank you, Laria. Thank you, everyone.